At the beginning of this project, all I had was a black screen. But after some time, it had procedural mountains, caves, water, trees, crafting, lighting, and even a zombie that could actually kill the player. The path between those two stages was not nearly as polished. For several builds in a row, every mountain was cut off at exactly the same height. The torch looked like glowing crosses lying on the ground, and the zombie could chase the player across flat terrain, but would completely give up in front of a single block step. I built all of this in C++ without using a game engine. SDL handled the window and input, OpenGL handled the graphics, and I had to build all the game systems myself. The goal was not to make a complete Minecraft clone, but a finished Minecraft-like prototype where I could explore the world, collect resources, build something, and encounter at least one mob. I started by creating a basic C++ project in C-Line. After setting up SDL and OpenGL, the program launched and showed me a perfectly black window. It was not very impressive, but it meant that the window, the OpenGL context, and the main loop were at least working. To test the rendering itself, I added a triangle. For that, I had to send the vertices to the GPU, created a couple of basic shaders, and made the first draw call. Once the triangle appeared, I replaced it with a three-dimensional cube. I added perspective and depth testing so the back face would not be rendered on top of the front ones. Then I created a camera and added movement using WASD and the mouse. At that point, there was still no actual player. I was simply flying freely around the scene along the horizontal axis, passing straight through cubes and looking at them from any angle. That mod was useful for testing the graphics, but it was clearly not suitable for the final game. After getting a single cube working, I moved on to my first terrain. I started with a simple pyramid made of blocks. It looked artificial, but it was useful for quickly testing column heights and how neighboring blocks connected. Once the basic surface worked, I replaced the fixed shape with seed-based generation. The height of each column was now controlled by noise. Grass covered the surface with a few layers of dirt underneath and stone deeper below. Using the same seed always generated the same map, while changing it to rebuild the entire world. But storing the whole world as one massive object would have been inconvenient, so I divided it into chunks. Each chunk stores its own array of blocks and builds a single combined mesh. This was also where I added the first important optimization. Blocks underground still exist as word data, but their hidden faces are never sent to OpenGL. Before adding each face, the program checks the neighboring cell. If there is an opaque block next to it, that shared face can never be seen, so it is simply left out of the mesh. Otherwise, entire invisible walls of unnecessary polygons would have been generated between neighboring chunks. At first, the chunk only existed inside a fixed pre-generated area. Then I added dynamic loading. As the player approaches the edge of the loaded world, new chunks are added to the generation queue, while chunks that are too far away are removed. Once the world started loading around the camera, it was time to replace free flight with an actual player. I added a collision box, gravity and vertical velocity. Now the character could fall onto the ground, could no longer move through blocks, and finally had a proper jump. Horizontal movement had to be checked separately on both axes. This way, when the player collides with a wall, they can still slide along it instead of stopping completely. Once the physics was working, I focused on giving the world more depth. The first blocks looked extremely flat because every face had almost the same brightness. I started with simple directional lighting. The top faces became brighter, while the side faces became darker. Then I added subtle darkening in the corners between neighboring blocks. After that, I implemented a proper shadow map. The world is rendered separately from the sun's point of view, and the resultant depth information is used to determine which surfaces are in shadow. After this, terrain overhangs could finally cast real shadows onto the ground. Since the sun already had a direction, I made it rotate slowly, then created a day and night cycle. The sky color, world brightness, lighting tint, and shadow intensity all changed over time. Then I added a crosshair to the center of the screen. The first version did not appear at all. It turned out I was drawing it before clearing the mainframe buffer, so it was rendered successfully and then immediately erased. Once I moved it to the very end of the render process, the crosshair finally stayed on the screen. Up to this point, Most blocks were only distinguished by color. The next step was creating the first texture atlas with grass, dirt, and stone. I asked ChatGPT to generate the atlas because my design skills could probably make stone look less convincing than a plain gray square. All the textures are stored inside a single image and each face receives the UV coordinates for the section it needs. Grass uses one texture for the top, another for the sides, and regular dirt underneath. After the first atlas, I created a new version that also included sand and water. If the terrain was below a fixed sea level, the empty space above it was filled with water, while the nearby surface blocks were turned into sand to form small beaches. Water had to be moved into a separate transparent rendering pass. First, all opaque geometry is rendered and then the transparent parts of the chunks are drawn from farther chunks to closer ones. I did not add swimming mechanics, water has no collision, so the player simply falls through it and walks along the bottom. For this prototype, that behavior was good enough. Then I created another atlas, this time with textures for tree trunks and leaves. Trees are generated procedurally, but only on suitable grass surfaces. The first version of the leaves looked like solid green cubes, so I updated the atlas again and added transparent pixels. The shader completely discards those pixels, which makes it possible to see the sky and tree trunks through the leaves. It also means that the shadow cast by the trees have small gaps in them instead of looking like solid cubes. Once the world itself started to look more or less complete, I moved on to the interface and player interactions. The first thing I added was a 9-slot hotbar. The selected slot can be changed using the number keys or the mouse wheel. The item icons is the same texture atlas as the blocks in the world. Then I added item counts. Instead of using separate font library, I created a small pixel style set of numbers made from rectangles. After that, pressing E opened a full inventory with 36 slots. While the inventory is open, the cursor is released, player movement is disabled, and closing it captures the mouse again. At first, the inventory was purely visual. Then I added the ability to select items with the mouse, move them into empty slots, and swap to their positions. Stacks of the same item can be combined up to a maximum of 64. If the entire stack does not fit, the destination is filled to the limit and the remaining items stay in the original slot. Now I needed a way to actually collect these items from the world. For that, I created a voxel raycast from the center of the camera. It moves through the block grid and finds the first valid cell under the crosshair. A white outline is drawn around the selected block. The left mouse button removes it, after which the chunk mesh is revealed. If the changed block is located near a chunk boundary, the neighboring chunks are updated as well. At first, the block simply disappeared. Later, it was added to the inventory, either by joining an existing incomplete stack or by using the first available empty slot. The right mouse button places the selected item back into the board. The new block position is determined by the face the player is looking at. Before placing it, the program checks that the position is empty and that the new block will not appear inside the player. The next texture atlas added wooden planks. I created the first crafting recipe. One log turns into 4 planks. The crafting itself worked immediately, but for some reason the planks could not be placed with the right mouse button. It turned out that the new item existed in the inventory, but I had forgotten to connect it to the corresponding block type. After fixing that, the planks could finally be placed normally, and I used them to build my first small house. It was a useful test of several systems at once, collecting wood, crafting, item stacks, the hotbar, and block placement. Next, I added coal ore to the atlas, along with a separate icon for the coal item itself. The ore is generated procedurally inside stone. When it is broken, the player receives coal instead of the ore block, and coal cannot be placed back into the world as a cube. After adding coal, I moved on to caves. 3-dimensional noise determines which stone blocks should be replaced with air. The chance is reduced to near the surface, so the terrain does not become covered in random holes. After launching the game, I spent quite a while digging underground and trying to find even one cave. At one point it started to feel like the generation system was not working at all. But eventually, the tunnel opened into a large underground chamber, confirming that the caves were actually generating and continuing across neighboring chunks. After creating regular hills, I wanted to add rare mountain regions. A separate noise layer determines where a mountain can appear, so the entire world does not turn into a one giant rocky landscape. Other layers create peaks, ridges, and smaller details. Grass remains on gentler slopes, while steeper areas are made of stone, sometimes with visible coal ore inside them. The first few builds looked very strange. Every mountain was cut off by the same perfectly flat horizontal line. Originally, each chunk was only 16 blocks tall. I increased the height to 64 blocks, but the problem was still there. Some old loops and calculations were still using 16 as the vertical limit. As a result, higher blocks could exist in the world data, but the mesh builder never reached them. Some word queries were also trying to access a second vertical chunk that did not actually exist. After fixing all the vertical calculations, the mountains finally start rendering at their full height. At the same time, I increased the word loading radius because the edge of the loaded area became much more noticeable from higher ground. After finishing the mountains, I continued the crafting chain. 2 planks can be turned into 4 sticks, and 1 stick combined with 1 piece of coal creates 4 torches. The first version of the torch was one of the strangest parts of the project. The model was made from 2 intersecting planes, so every torch looked like a cross. It also appeared along the same way on walls and on the ground, lying at roughly the same angle. On top of that, the light from every torch was simply added together. Placing several torches close to each other turned the surrounding surface into an overexposed white area. I replaced the model with a thin, three-dimensional cuboid. On the ground, the torch now stands upright. When attached to a wall, its lower part stays close to the surface while the top leans slightly outward. I also reduced the light intensity, decreased the radius, and limited the maximum combined brightness. Now a group of torches expand the illuminated area without completely washing out all the surrounding colors. And to hide the sharp edge of the world at the increased render distance, I added fog. Distant blocks gradually blend into the sky color, which changed together with the day and night cycle. The final major system was the zombie. Its model is built from separate cubes for the head, body, arms, and legs. It runs toward the player, moves its legs while walking, and starts chasing from a short distance away. On flat ground, everything worked fairly quickly, but even a small change in the height completely broke its movement. The zombie could not climb a single block and refused to step down. I changed the ground detection, support checks, and movement order several times, but it still kept stopping in front of an ordinary step. In the end, I had to rebuild the entire movement algorithm. Now it first checks the full target position on both the X and Z axis. If that position is blocked, then the zombie tries to step up by 1 block or move down to a lower surface. Only after that does it try moving separately along each horizontal axis, allowing it to slide along obstacles. After several failed versions, it finally started moving properly across voxel terrain. Then I gave the player 20 health points, displayed as 10 hearts. When the zombie gets close enough, it attacks roughly once per second and deals 3 points of damage. Because of that, the HUD also supports half hearts. When health reaches 0, player control is disabled, the screen gradually turns red, and after 2 seconds the player respawns in the starting area with full health. The inventory is preserved, while the zombie is reset and appears again later. In the end, a simple black window turned into a small Minecraft-like prototype. The world is generated procedurally in chunks and continues loading around the player. It contains plains, water, sandy beaches, trees, caves, mountains, and coal ore. Hidden block faces are excluded from the mesh, while generation works spread across multiple frames, so movement does not freeze whenever new areas appear. The player can explore the world, break blocks, collect them in the inventory, and place them back into the environment. Wood can be turned into planks, planks into sticks, and sticks combined with coal can be used to craft torches for exploring caves. The game also has a day and night cycle, directional shadows, local lighting, and distance fog. And the zombie can navigate the same terrain, catch the player, and send them back to the respawn point. This is not a complete version of Minecraft and it was never meant to recreate all of its content. There are no tools, no word saving, no hundreds of crafting recipes, and no large collection of mobs. But that was not the main goal. I wanted to build the most recognizable system myself and bring them to a point where they did not just exist separately, but actually work together. At some point, the project stopped feeling like a collection of technical tests and started feeling like a small game. For this experiment, I think it is complete. And most importantly, the zombie finally learned how to defeat stairs. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And I will leave this Minecraft prototype source code and the finished build on Patreon. And see you in the next video.